Okay, right. So they don't get any less weird, these, I'll be honest. I've done a few now, but they're still very strange. If I keep you all muted, but if you have got a question while I'm going through, then please do, just butt in and ask the question and stuff. But otherwise, I'll try and come through the chat towards the end and stuff as we go. I am going to record it, so I'll put an attachment to that after I've done. But some people I know, some people I don't, which is great. It's always good to get new people and stuff. For those who don't know me, I'm Graham Chatterley. I was for a long time assistant head in a SEMH setting, and am now chose the best possible time to start my own company up, leaving in December, just before the apocalypse. So I've a bit of and thought I'd put it to good use. So why was this all came about? It started with I think it was a Twitter to start with, and like most of the good things that I do, it started off with me getting annoyed and ranting about something. So I had my little rant, and I was very critical of, first of all, Tom Bennett's document about rebooting behaviour, and then the DfE guidance has come out, and that isn't much better. And I've been quite openly critical about both of those, but I don't think it's fair to be critical of something unless you can actually put up something as an alternative. So that's what I've tried to do. Now, the reason I'm so against that sort of behaviour focused approach is because we're not in usual circumstances, and at the best of times there are a number of pupils that struggle with that kind of stuff. There's a lot of children who are at home now finding life, although there's all the children that have got various different things that we'll talk about that's made their lockdown experience really difficult. There are children at home now who are actually having a much better time because they haven't got things at school that make their life very difficult a lot of the time. And we'll cover all those things sort of as we go. But the approach that we're taking with many more vulnerable children is just going to overwhelm our schools and our pastoral systems and things that we've got in. So we need to do something different, in my opinion, and that's why I've chosen to put this together. Now, I stumbled into SEMH. I was a PE teacher originally. I used to have a good relationship with the kids that you would portray as the naughty ones or whatever you want to call them. But I always found that by building a decent relationship with them, things got helped me with regard to other stuff. And when you've got a relationship with the more challenging pupils, then that can make your life as a teacher a lot easier. But I've got an experience as a team teach tutor as well, and team teaching very much talks about what the feelings are that drive the behaviour. Now, when you're looking at solely the behaviour, then you create a lot of problems for you. When you're looking at the feelings behind the behaviour, you start to open up a few doors in terms of how do we manage the feelings in order to prevent the behaviour. But for me, that was never quite enough, and I had somebody called Lisa Wisher come and do some training with me. Anybody's in the northwest, or she's based in Altrincham, I think, but she is quite amazing, works for adoption services. And she sent me down this rabbit hole, talking about neuroscience, talking about the children's experiences and all that kind of stuff. And I've never quite managed to get out of that. So a lot of my inspiration comes from, obviously, from the stuff from Maslow, which, is still very much relevant. And we'll tweak that to fit our own needs and stuff, but mainly through sort of the likes of Bruce Perry. And that's where this sequential idea has sort of come about. The neurosequential approach from Bruce Perry is very much based around repairing really significant trauma, which is not what we're trying to do here, but we're looking at a set of things that we don't try and do the third part of that until we've done the first part properly. And that's very much what this is about. If we're wanting children to learn, then we've got to get them building blocks in place first. And if we've got children coming back who have experienced a lot of loss and stuff like that, then we've got to have all the things in place in order to get to where we want to be. And we have to do it in that order, and we have to do it at the pace that suits that child. And I'll reiterate that as we go through. I went to the Lose the Boobs event in I think it was February now. It feels like a million years ago, but it was in February. And the big thing about that was there was a lot of talk about that these people have all got nice ideas, but it's not practical and it can't be done, and you know, or they just let the kids run riot and they don't think about the teachers and all that. And a lot of people went to that event and they came away from that event realizing, well, that's not the case at all. There is another way that we can do this, and there is alternatives to what we're being told all the time. And we're in a similar position now in that we're being told by the DfE that we've got to do this very strict. We've got to hit them with rules and boundaries head on, and we've got to bring all this new health and safety stuff in and all that kind of stuff. There's another way of doing it. I'm not against rules and boundaries. I'm not against rewards and sanctions to some degree, although anybody who saw the Rachel Tomlinson thread for her school based in Hereford, I think it is, in Rawtenstall, she talks about a school that doesn't have any rewards and any sanctions, and how that works for her setting. And I'm not saying it's the way to go, but I think it's well worth a look. It sounds like something that could be really interesting, because often we get this behaviourist approach around that, and we can avoid it if we try hard enough. But we do need the rules in place. We do need to talk about the new safety implications that we've got, but the boundaries and the rules and stuff should be underpinning a much more human, much more relationships-based approach. And I think it has to be relationships first, boundaries second for me in that respect, in how we go about doing it. And there's no reason why we have to hit them head on and we have to do assemblies and talk about, because more rules and more things to get wrong, more rules and more challenges, more things to make them heightened, more things to make them worried. We can talk about the safety implications stuff in a PHSE session. We can do it in a discussion forum. We can do much more nurturing about it, how it impacts them, how it benefits them and the other people around them. Those are conversations that we can have if we don't go all guns blazing in that respect. The other thing that was on that Tom Bennett document, just before I get to the presentation, was there was a part about teaching behaviour, and I got all excited because I'm all about teaching behaviour, and we often don't do it well enough. But then all it talked about was modelling behaviour, and yes, modelling behaviour is part of it. We have to do it ourselves if we want the children to follow it up. But if we want to teach behaviour, we think about how do we learn from things, but make it a written subject or anything like that. We don't just model it and then let them do it and then that's it. We allow mistakes, we learn from the mistakes, we put plans in to put things right, and we do corrections, and we don't allow children to do this often enough with behaviour the way that we would do other things, and that for me is a real area where we can be better. From my experience in SEMH, it was full of children who, if they'd had more support early on, if they'd had somebody take them under the wing, if they'd had a different approach, they probably would have been able to manage in mainstream. And the support came too late. And by that, I mean they'd already experienced so much failure that they weren't in a position to succeed. And we have to give them more opportunity for that success if we want that to be a case where we can move forward. Now, the real thing about this is, because this is not new to me, I've slightly tweaked the approach, but I've said for a number of times, and all the training that I've done is based around the idea that if we had a situation where the way that we react is with more understanding and more empathy of the reasons why the behaviours come, it would benefit every child in every school. This doesn't have to be because we've got a crisis. This doesn't have to be for just our really, really ones that are struggling. This will benefit all children. It will benefit those children that are in class at the moment, or when they're in class, they're spending all of their time concentrating on managing their feelings because they're so worried about becoming overwhelmed and getting into trouble. They're not actually learning. You've got those children ticking along in the background who, you know, they never cause any bother, they never bring any attention to themselves, but they never actually achieve the potential. And quite often they're going home and they've managed the feelings all day and then they become completely overwhelmed and let it out at home, and then the parents get it, or they're so tired from the effort of that, then they're spending most of the time when they're at home sleeping. And no child should be in that position where all of their effort and all their focus goes on suppressing what they're feeling. It's just not beneficial. And we talk about disruption being the major obstacle to learning. Well, let's create an environment where we have far less dysregulated children, and then we have far calmer classrooms, and we have more children that are able to, and more teaching that can take place. So it's a win-win for everybody if we can get this right. So I'm just going to share the presentation with you now. Bear with me, and we'll get started. Just bear in mind, I can't hear anybody, and I won't be able to see anybody either once I start this. So, like I say, if you've got a question, just butt in, and that's absolutely fine. Right. Okay. So where I chose to start, anybody who attended the webinar I did a couple of weeks ago, this is kind of where I finished. So this kind of matches in quite nicely. Now the DfE guidance is very, very behaviour but focused, and it's not taking into account anything that's below this line. So the reality is that, and again, I got into a couple of discussions on social media, because I said that, you know, in the Tom Bennett document, it said that we should not expect that children have experienced any negative stuff while they were off. And I said we should expect all children to have had have lost something whilst they're off. And even if they've had a great time while they've been off and it's been really successful, they've still lost friendships, they've still lost trusted adults, and we have to take that into account when they come back, because it will bring with it anxieties. But for those that have been off and their experiences have been that the teachers left me, it didn't feel safe, and it doesn't feel safe now when I'm back, because the environment's going to be completely alien. You know, you're looking at what the environment's like for the younger ones. You know, it's bad enough that we've got the older ones that are having to sit further apart, and we've got all sorts going on. But for the little ones, anything that can't be deep cleaned is gone, the sand's gone, the water's gone. It's not school for them children, and it's going to be really, really challenging for them to come back to an environment that is just not what school is to them. And you know, that feeling that everybody's forgotten about me. You know, some schools have done amazing jobs with keeping contact with kids and stuff like that, but it's been a really difficult thing to do, and not all children will. It's about their perceptions at the end of the day. They won't perceive that they've had enough contact. No matter how much we give them, it'll never be enough for some of these children. So we have to take those things into account. Now, what you've got there is you've got children that will, you know, there is the grief. If they have had the bereavement, then they'll have had proper grief, you know, and grief that will take a long time to repair and that kind of stuff. But it's also, you can grieve for things that aren't gone forever. You know, they can be grieving for those relationships that have disappeared, and they can be grieving for those other things that have gone. It will impact on low self-esteem massively. And you know, again, I've said before, the only thing that all of the children had in common that came to me when I worked in the SEMH setting, you know, children on the ASD spectrum, the ADHD spectrum, trauma, whatever it was that they had experienced, the one thing they all had in common was they all had low self-esteem, because they'd all suffered failure at previous settings. There'll be a lot of fear about all sorts of different things when they come back, which I'll come to, and there'll be anger as well. So if you've got those things, then what you're going to have is you're going to have a situation where you're going to get either challenging or aggressive behavior through being overwhelmed or whatever it is. You're going to have defiant and avoidant behavior. You're going to have not thinking and not learning because they're not working in the right part of the brain for those things to take place. Now, when you're getting challenging and aggressive and defiant behavior, then your choice as a member of staff is well, how do you approach that situation? Now, if you follow the DfE guidance, then the way that you must react to that situation is to be punitive and to threaten consequences. And we're talking about sanctions again. And we're already talking about exclusions and isolation. And we haven't even finished lockdown yet. We're already talking about doing isolation and exclusion, which seems absolutely crazy to me. What we're going to end up with is conflict, and that's a bog standard conflict spiral. You know, you see that in any team teach course whatsoever. And it's about, for me, ignoring the guidance. It's what do you see as a member of staff in that situation? Now, it's hard when you've been hit relentlessly in your initial teacher training about being an authority figure, and then you've got this guidance telling you that you've got to come down hard on this behaviour, and you've got to look, you're only seeing the behaviour and not everything else. If that's the position that you're in, then what you're going to see is a rule breaker. You're seeing a child that's doing something they shouldn't be doing. They're a rule breaker. It's a choice that they've made that behaviour. We need to threaten them with what will happen if they don't conform, and then, you know, we may need to put that punishment in for that particular child. Now, if that's what we see and that's how we approach that situation, then we have an inevitable conflict, and all we do is we compound those experiences that they're not, and we compound those feelings. But if we see a child that's distressed and a child that's dysregulated, then our impulse is to regulate them, is to help them, is to support them, is to nurture them. And if we do that, then instead of threatening what's going to happen if they don't conform, let's remind them of the times they did things well. Let's remind them of the successes that they've had, the times that they managed their anger, the times that they chose to do the right thing. If we do that, then we're looking at a child that needs to be understood, and we can show them that we do understand and that we are going to support them. So what we can then do, using that more human, more empathetic approach, is, although they've got those feelings, that negative feelings that we've got, we're now in a situation where we're reacting much calmly, we're listening, we're reminding them of the successes, we're offering an opportunity to fix it. We start to develop their understanding. Because of that, we change the way that we react, we change the way that they experience things. They now believe that people can care, that they can be trusted, that they are safe, and this changes the way that they feel. So they feel safe, they feel calmer, they feel more positive. This in turn then means that the behaviours are going to be more regulated, they're going to be more likely to talk to you, they might seek you out for support, but most importantly, they're going to be able to switch on that thinking brain. So when you're in that classroom, you've got a safe, calmer, positive environment with children that are thinking. You therefore have a position where children are ready to learn, and you are going to get a much more productive environment that you've got there. And that's just generally even more important now with the situation that we've got. And for me, the easiest way to look at it is when the children come in back from whatever they've experienced, and I'm opening my eyes, I'm expecting the worst, I'm preparing for whatever they're coming at me with. I'm going to triage where they're at, okay? And by triaging them, I treat every child as if they've got that emotional injury, okay? And that gives me that right mindset for me to approach that. I'm seeing a distressed child rather than a child that's breaking the rules, and my mindset is completely different. I'm taking understanding and empathy rather than an attempt to get them to conform, and that will completely put water on the fire rather than making it bigger. So once I've got that armor to take with me, I'm then working out where do I need to start. And when I talk about the sequential approach and the 5 steps, what I mean is, where are they coming in regard to the 5 steps? You will have some children that are going to have to start right from the beginning, and we're going to have to rebuild everything. You're going to have other children that have had a fairly safe, fairly calm time, but they still might be coming back a bit dysregulated, so you're going to start somewhere in the middle. You might have others that are coming back relatively settled, and you can go nearer the top. And it's just a guesstimate at this point. You don't know where you're at, but you're trying to make an educated guess so that you can focus on the right thing at the right time. And then you got to decide, right, what's my treatment for this child? And that is, where are they at this? And the really important thing is, we can't rush the healing process. Just like we couldn't rush a broken bone to fix, we can't rush an emotional injury. So we have to be in a position where we let the pupil lead us on this, and we take it step by step, and we don't progress to the next step until they've got the previous step sorted. Just like we would do with any learning. You wouldn't go to teach advanced maths until you've got the idea of basic maths, and it's exactly the same principle as that. Like I mentioned, that all children have lost different things, and I'll talk about this more detail in a minute, but again, the children don't want sympathy. They don't want you to try and make it better. They don't want you to try and distract them. They don't want you to say, well, at least this is okay, or they're not interested in any of that. They just want somebody who is going to listen to them and be there with them, and that's the most important thing that we can do when it comes to that. So here we have this sequential approach, 5 steps, but very similar. Like I said, it's based in principle in organisation around Maslow, and something that I've used for a long time. At the bottom is the safety. Once we've got the safety, we're regaining trust, and that's predominantly trust of adults, which has been lost in this situation. Then we're looking to support re-regulation, because we're going to have a lot of dysregulated children coming in. Again, going back to the document that was talking about misbehaviour. Well, I'm talking about dysregulation and different things. Misbehaviour implies choice. There won't be choice involved in what children are feeling and feeling heightened and feeling dysregulated when they come back. They won't have that level of control for a lot of them. Then we've got to rebuild belonging, which is really important, because what we want for the children is we want to foster that courage and vulnerability. We want that child to put their hand up and answer the question without the fear of rejection of their peers. We want that children to be brave in their learning and risk getting things wrong and stuff like that. And they're things we ask them to do on an almost daily basis that require an awful amount of courage to do. It's difficult to be courageous when you're feeling very low and feeling very worried about things. So first part we've got is the safety, and I've put some acronyms in that they're not vital, but they're just to sort of give an idea. So in terms of safety, first thing first, we've got to listen, and listening is really important, and it's very hard sometimes as teachers and educators to just shut up. We're really bad at just shutting up and listening, especially when children are telling us absolute nonsense, and they're spouting all sorts of rubbish. Or they hit somebody because aliens had told them to. It's nonsense. But we can listen, let them speak it out, and then we can talk about it. What's the best thing we can do as adults when we have a worry is to just have a good rant about it, talk about it. That's how this all started for me. I mean, it was getting it off your chest. Something annoys you, something bothers you, something worries you. Get it out there, release it. Then we'll worry about whether they're talking rubbish or not. We're just doing that initial release first of all. They'll also, often they speak in code, and we might have to work out where where we're at and what they're trying to tell us and things like that. And that intuition comes from knowing that child really, really well. And we're in that position to do that. And the more opportunity we spend doing things like extending form group time, nurture times, PHSE sessions, things like that, it gives us more opportunity for these conversations and more opportunity for that intuitive side of us to figure out what's going on in terms of what they're feeling. The other big clue to what they're feeling is to look at the physical signs that are being given to us. You know, are they more visibly tense? Are they fidgety? Are they uncomfortable? Are they more red in the face? Is the breathing different? Is there eye contact? All of these things might just give us a clue as to what they're feeling. But the most important thing that we can do is like I say, is to validate and to be human, and you know, tell them, well, I'm really worried as well, and I felt like this, and you know, show them that having feelings is okay. You know, whether it's good or bad. You know, we all get angry. It's okay to be angry. It's not okay to behave in this way because you're angry, but being angry isn't the problem. And we sometimes just kind of accidentally associate being angry as something that's wrong. You know, we tell them, don't be angry. You know, is one of the things we go, don't be upset, don't cry. We need to get rid of that. We need to feel whatever they're feeling, and we accept it, and we just join them in it. And that's really important. And we've got to avoid that idea that's sort of linked to the sympathy that we can minimize everything to make it feel better. You know, it's not that bad, or at least this didn't happen, or anything like that. Forget all those things. We're just going to be with them. And that is a nice little picture there that was sent by a very wise person to me the other day. You know, just sit with them. Don't preach, don't advise, just be there and be supportive. And that can be really powerful when we do stuff like that. Second part that we're looking at, once we've got the child, that safety element in place, and we've got that child that feels listened to, we're starting to build trust already. But we're in a really difficult position with regard to a loss of trust with the children. And it's through no fault of their own, no fault of our own that this has happened, but essentially we have let them down, we have abandoned them, we've sent them away at a very short notice, which again, you know, we were told we had about 2 days notice. But that, again, it's about the perception of the child rather than what the actual reality is. And the child's perception and child's reality is that you just left them. Now, because of that, you're going to see a lot of attachment style behaviours coming in reverse. And I know some people were on the course the other week. I did talk about this then, but I think it's worth re-mentioning. You're going to have those children that what they need is your reassurance, because they are worried that you're just going to leave again. The problem we've got is we can't guarantee that we won't. We've just got to do the best that we possibly can in this situation. You know, we may get a second wave, schools may reopen then close again. We really don't know what's going to happen, but we can do our very best to make them feel that, like we're not. But the behaviours that we're going to see from them are that they don't know when we're going to leave them again. So the safest thing for them to do is to have us around all the time. So they're going to be keeping us as close as they possibly can. They're probably going to abandon social distancing of any respect whatsoever to be hanging off your pant leg and stuff. They are going to want to be asking you questions all the time just to get that constant contact with you. They're going to want constant reassurance on the work and all that kind of stuff. And we've just got to keep reassuring those children that we are not going to leave them again. And it wasn't our choice to leave them in the first place. We're going to have other children who have built a relationship with us. They've showed us their feelings. They've let the guard down with us. And then that's gone. And so when they come back, those walls are going to be back up. They're going to be very wary of showing their feelings again. They're going to be trying to keep us at arm's length. They're probably going to be quite withdrawn. They might be difficult to engage in work. They're going to be defiant. And we've just got to keep trying to re-engage that relationship and get it back to where it was. And we might have to do that away from the learning, through play, through contacts out of the classroom on yard or something like that, to try and re-engage that relationship for that child. And however we choose to do that, the children better than I do. And the third one is, you're going to have a lot of children who are angry at us, and they're angry at us again because we left them. Now, if they're angry at us, then what they're going to do is they're going to test us. They're going to push the luck a little bit, and they're going to be challenging, and we have to use those understanding, empathetic reactions with them children more than any, because we've got to prove ourselves again to them. And it's really important that we put these measures in place to regain that trust, because although it wasn't our fault, as far as the children are concerned, it was. So we've got to be the one that fixes it. The third part is about re-regulation, and this is where many of your children are going to be coming back. And again, like I say, misunderstood as misbehaviour. Dysregulation is going to be a real problem, and it's a problem in classrooms as it is. The volume of dysregulated children has just gone up astronomically, and that's where meeting dysregulated children with the same boundary-based approach, threat-based approach that we had before, you would have had a few stragglers that couldn't quite manage it, and we'd go and put them in isolation, or we'd temporarily exclude, or anything like that. If we do that with the volume of children that we've got, we're going to overwhelm pastoral teams. We're going to end up with more children out than in, and it's going to be a real problem for us to do. So we need those techniques in place to regulate the children. And if it was me and I was there, that would be the first thing I did every morning, was an activity to re-regulate the children. The problem is we do sort of blanket approaches that try to regulate all the children all at once by doing the same thing, but that's not how re-regulation works. If again we think of ourselves as adults, all the people that are assigned into this course, there'll be a number of different ways in which people re-regulate. Some will use physical activity, some will use craft and art and creativity, some will use mindfulness and calming and things like that. We have to know what works for those children, and initially we're going to have to lead that, and we're going to have to direct that for those children. And it might be that we can do it as a whole class activity with 4 or 5 different things going on. It might be that we do interventions. That's again, how we do it isn't as important as the reason why we do it. And what we want to get to is a child that knows what their own re-regulation strategy is, and then guide them to, or have them come to us and say, look, I feel this way, can I go and do this? I feel quite angry, can I go and have 5 minutes running around somewhere, or can I go and talk to such and such, or whatever it is that they choose to do. And it's really important that we allow the children to do that. And yes, there will be some that try and push the luck with it, but it's really important that we're aware of where we're at with regard to that. Because what we can do by doing all of that is we take the dysregulation away, we take the child out of their survival brain, and we flick that switch into their thinking brain. So a child that feels safe and calm and regulated is a child that can think and a child that can learn. And if that child is then not being disruptive, then everybody else can learn as well. So again, it's a win-win for everybody by taking that focus on re-regulation. And we've got to be aware as well that some children will be able to calm themselves down. And that's great if they can do that, but then we've got to support them and be aware of whether they are managing that solely rather than releasing it. Because it's great if a child has a big blow up, it's really difficult in the moment, but then it's gone and it's been released and all the chemicals and everything has been got rid of. If you've got a child that has all of these feelings and he's in that wrong part of the brain, but he's suppressing that, managing that all day long, then that is when they're going home exhausted. They're going home and releasing all the frustrations out on the parents, and they're also not taking on information and remembering, and all the things are important for learning when they're in the classroom. Stage 4 is about belonging. You know, we've got to reduce and remove the fear of rejection, because that will be our barrier for learning for many. And we're now in a position where children have not had the contact that they would have had before. They may have had a conversation on Zoom or something like that with other children, but many will be coming back to school thinking they've been forgotten about, thinking that the child that was the best friend is now going to be best friends with somebody else. You know, they're going to all be doing this while then I've done this, and it doesn't matter. All of these things are going to be really sort of big impact on that child coming back. So they're going to be having that fear of rejection when they come back, and it's an extremely powerful emotion, a fear of rejection, and it drives an awful lot of the behaviours that led to children who came to me in SEMH after failing in mainstream, because they were so worried about what other people were thinking all the time, it dysregulated them completely. Now, where we're in a better position for this now is we've already done step 3, we've done the regulation, so therefore we're in a better position to rebuild the belonging, and that's why the sequence is so important. So how do we remove that? Well, the belonging comes through lots of social skills support, essentially, you know, but you know, whether you structure that in a formal way, you know, we used to use talk about, but I'm sure there's lots of others, or whether you do it in a less formal way, and you start with paired work, you work to small groups, you let the children choose who they're going to work, all of those different things to get to a point of including that child. But what we need to do is to make sure that we work hard to put that back in place. I had a situation where I went to work with I went to do some support for a year 1 child, and that year 1 child desperately wanted friends and to be part of that group that he was in. Now, the problem was he was expecting rejection the second he walked through the door, and the fear of rejection overtook everything else. So that was all he could think about. That dysregulated him and caused him to behave poorly, caused him to lash out, and made the other children very wary of him. He could sense the children were very wary of him, so the next time he'd come in, although he desperately wanted to be friends with them, he knew they were wary of him, he knew they were going to reject him, so he'll reject them first and lash out. And that was a cycle that child was stuck in for ages. Now, by tackling the dysregulation, you then put the position in to build the belonging. And where we go wrong in schools, and that's one of the beautiful things about this approach, is these are all things that we already do. There's no reinventing the wheel, there's no expensive interventions. These are all things that we already do in school. We just don't do them in a structured, scaffolded way. You know, we used to do social skills for a long time, and in the groups, the social skills groups, the children were brilliant. They'd take turns, they'd listen, they'd be kind to each other, and they'd be brilliant. And then they'd walk out of that room they'd just done a social skills group in to a big crowd that made them anxious, that made them dysregulated, and everything they'd just learned in that social skills group has been forgotten because they're now in survival mode. So by getting them out of survival mode and into thinking mode, they can then rebuild the belonging. By making them more predictable and more consistent, the other children won't reject them. And that's how we build friendships for children. And it's really important that we do all the steps in order to get to where we need to be. Because where we want to be is in a situation where we have created a child that's courageous in their learning. It's all about getting that position to ready to learn. You know, ready to learn can look different for different situations. You know, we can have a list of rules, or we can say, what does being ready to learn look like? You know, we can talk about lots of rules, or we can go, what does safety look like? The language is important, and it's in something that we've got to think about. But in order to get to courage, we've got to come through vulnerability. And if things have experienced a lot of shame, lots of fear, lots of failure, feeling worthless, low self-esteem, all those things, then they're not in a position to be courageous. They're not in a position to put themselves out there and answer questions. So we've got to get rid of that shame, get rid of that fear, and build that self-esteem in order to get to that position. We want them to take risks with the learning. We want them to put their hand up and answer questions. You know, we think about how often we ask children to do that. I asked you to do that at the beginning of this, and there will be people sat there who have sat there listening to me. Hopefully you're all still there, and you'll have thought about asking a question, and then you'll have thought, hang on, there's 50 people in this room who are going to be looking at me when I do that, and decided against it. It takes a tremendous amount of courage to do those things, and to put yourself in front of all those people and ask those things. And we ask children to do that all of the time with their peers. And without the building blocks in place, they're never going to be able to do that. But if they don't do that, then how do we push the learning, and how do we achieve what we want to achieve for those children? And that, you know, that vulnerability and courage stuff is very much based on the work of Brené Brown. And, you know, she will be quite open. You know, there's a bit there. None of us have ever achieved anything good or positive without making ourselves vulnerable first. That asking somebody on a date, that going to a job interview, that asking somebody to marry you, they require you to be incredibly vulnerable and risk failure and risk rejection. And yet we've done them anyway, because we've got our building blocks in place. We've got to give the children the same opportunity that we've got. You'll hear a lot about resilience, especially emotional resilience, and, you know, how do we bounce back from disappointments? Well, there's never been a time where we need resilience more than right now. And you know, we've got a lot to bounce back from when we come into school. So we've got to build on the emotional regulation and the impulse control, which is extremely difficult for children who are on an ADHD spectrum and stuff like that. But we build those things through the regulation and the teaching the regulation and the using up the anger and knowing how to get rid of frustration before it overwhelms us, and all of those skills we can teach them in stage 3. We can then start to look at emotional regulation and impulse control. We're looking at realistic optimism. How can you be optimistic if all you've experienced is failure? If you don't have enough positives to draw on when the time comes to make a decision about something, if all your experiences are negative, then you aren't going to forecast a positive outcome to things. So if we want optimism from children, we have to give them success. We have to be talent spotting. We have to remind them of successes rather than threatening failures, and be really important in that respect. We need flexible thinking and empathy, which can be a massive challenge for children who are on the autistic spectrum. Doesn't mean we shouldn't try to teach it. We might not ever get to a point where they're on a level playing field with other children in this area, but they can still improve it. And it doesn't mean that we should just not bother, because we can teach those things within the social skills. We've got the regulation, we can then start to really work hard with the social skills. And there's lots of other elements that go in the social skills, but they're just 2 that are linked to emotional resilience. Then we've got the ability to bounce back ability from the obstacles that have been thrown. Like I say, never needed more than right now, but you need the other bits in place in order to have that. And then we want them to put themselves out there, and we want them to do that vulnerability and courage, and that comes in the final stages. So you can see how it all starts to piece together, but you need the bits to build on top of the other bits, rather than just going in and trying to do these activities. So from a takeaway perspective, the main things that come out of the approach is you know, how we react will dictate how well we can triage where we start from. And they'll all have different starting points, and we might get it wrong, and we might go too high, and we might have to drop it back. We might have something what's working, and we've underestimated them, and they might be able to go in. Doesn't matter. It's a guesstimate, like I say at the start. But we keep the order, and we follow that sequence. That's our scaffold to use in terms of how we support them when they come back. Really important that we do that. The other thing that we've got to do is we've got to let the pupil lead. Yeah, we can't try and go too fast. The children have to go at their own speed. We don't know what they've experienced. We don't know how long it's going to take them to recover from these things. We don't know how long it's going to take to rebuild the trust. We don't know how long, you know, whether we're going to have a second impact and start again or what. So we have to go at the pupil's pace, because if we try and run before we walk, then it will ultimately go wrong. So that is a sequential approach. I'll come off this in a sec to hopefully answer some questions and things. Please do follow me on Twitter. If you've enjoyed it, then please do tweet about it, you know, and stuff. Let people know that there is another way. You know, it doesn't have to be this way, but it's just something that isn't what the DfE is telling everybody to do. There's some brilliant stuff out there. The Barry Carpenter stuff on recovery classrooms, stuff from Devon Five Ways is really good. I can't think of the name of the document. And lots of other different things that can be used that have a very similar approach. You'll easily find me on LinkedIn. There aren't many Graham Chatterleys about, although I did meet one the other day. He was delivering from Amazon, which was an experience. I don't know who was more surprised, me or him. And then I have got a Facebook page on Change of Perception. So I'm going to come off the slideshow now. And like I say, if you've got questions, I'm going to try and go through the chat and stuff, but do just butt in. I don't mind, but I'll get onto the chat first of all. Yeah, I think that's one of the big questions that sort of was expecting was about, you know, when you've got so many children and a lot of it's sort of one-to-one stuff, but it doesn't have to be one-to-one stuff. It can be, like I say, through PHSE sessions, through form group time, through nurture groups and stuff like that, which I'd be absolutely stunned if schools haven't got some plan to do that kind of thing. You know, you don't have to pull children out one-to-one to sort of have a conversation about how they're feeling and stuff like that. If we're going through all the different health and safety implications and how it impacts them and having proper dialogue about these things, then these things will work their way into conversations and stuff like that. You know, it's listening is something that we can do generally, you know, and just being in that approach. And we will get those odd situations where we can pull them one to side, but we've got to focus on the ones that are at the very bottom. This is why the triage is so important. If we've got the real ones that are struggling first at the bottom, and then work our way through the other ones, then I think we can be better on those things. Because if we've got children who are becoming dysregulated, and if we're going down an approach of we're just gonna hit them with the sanctions and the challenges, and we're going to send them out, and they're going to go to isolation, or they're going to go to pastoral teams. Having a small pastoral team, they'll soon be overwhelmed and stuff. So we've got the disruption somewhere. You know, do we deal with it by fighting with them, or do we deal with it by trying to manage them and stuff in that respect? You know, these are decisions that we've got to make, and we might have to invest in it in the short term, but we'll get a big longer term payoff. Clients on directing towards one-to-one, and I think this approach, the role of the form tutor and the class teacher within this approach is so vital. And I think the role of the form tutor has just become a get the register done and kind of thing now. And you know, registrations used to be 20 minutes, and then they were 10 minutes, and now they're 5 minutes, and things like that. But I used to find the registration time such an important time to touch base with my class and find out where they were at and resolve any issues and all those different things. And I think one thing we have to do when we come back is use the registration times a lot better. You know, we don't necessarily have to go into a full-blown nurture group and stuff, although I'd love it if we did, but it has to be that there has to be time to touch base with the kids and try and work out where they're feeling and where they're at and how we can help them and how we can regulate and stuff, because that is an opportunity to get them ready to learn. And if we don't use that form group time to get them ready for learning, then we're sending kids to class who aren't ready. And how much time, for the sake of saving 5 minutes in that form group session, how much time gets wasted by the class teacher trying to get them settled for the next lesson? And we talk about time is precious and all of that kind of stuff, and you know, let's use it more wisely. How do we win over the old school staff? And I think you're always going to be up against it in that respect. I think whether you can get them to understand initially why this is a better approach, I don't know. But once they start to see what they're up against with regard to coming back, and once they're trying to enforce these roles and boundaries and realizing that they've got far more children who are finding it impossible than they did before, I think there might be a position where something has to be different. You know, if you're going back and you're having to exclude loads of kids, then that might be, and unfortunately we're going to have to learn the hard way. But I've got to be honest, from my experience of talking to lots of head teachers during this whole experience, there is a full awareness from the vast majority that well-being has got to be the priority. And so we have an opportunity for change in that respect. And there's some brilliant stuff out there in regard to, you know, changes, huge whole-scale changes in terms of the whole curriculum and system that, let's be honest, is based on the industrial age. I did the Martin Illingworth and Ian Gilbert one yesterday, where they're talking about what's the important in terms of learning. It's a time for doing everything a little bit differently, and it's we've got time to trial it as we're bringing the children back, hopefully. It won't be for everybody, I'm fully aware of that, but if we can get it for the majority, then we stand half a chance. Okay, how many people have I still got? I've still got lots of people. Okay, does anybody actually want to turn the microphone on and ask me anything or anything like that?
Hi, Graham.
Hello.
Yeah, hi.
Hey, Jonathan, you all right?
Yeah, I love your stuff, and you put it across in such a friendly and nice to listen way.
Thank you.
You're very good to listen to. I was just wondering, have you used this stage model in any other situation and done any research in it yourself?
I think it was embedded in sort of whatever I would do, and sort of I used to try and work with the school about, because like I said, the problem we used to have was we'd do all of the bits, but have no structure to it. So we'd do all these social skills things, and then because they couldn't regulate themselves, they couldn't put them into practice, and we still have all the fight. And so trying to get that message across was quite important. And we were, because we were SEMH and we had children that had got significant traumas and things like that, I used the Bruce Perry model with our staff quite a lot. And we did a lot of work about repairing traumas and stuff like that, and linked it to the PACE and things like that. But this is kind of an opportunity now to make that a lot more mainstream. I'd been sort of looking to bring in the neurosequential approach, but the first step of that is about touch. So that's completely out of the window now.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Building safety through touch is not something that we can really do right now. So it was kind of that's gone on the back burner. But then, like I say, I saw the Tom Bennett document, and it made me seethe. And then it got followed up with the DfE stuff, and I wrote a 3,500 word critique of it that was just way too long. And then I did a video, and then that was way too long. But all the time while I was doing these things, I kind of was structuring my own thoughts in a way to sort of, and that's when I sort of structured it into the sequential approach, which I do think, you know, whether it's as it is, as I've put it out there, I think it's got real legs. Whether it's got tweaks to be made and things like that, or something more prescriptive to go alongside it, I don't know. But there has to be something else to what the DfE are putting out there.
I think what's really great about having the stages is something that people can make their own by doing their tweaks. And they might say, oh, I think this one should come a little bit before that, but you've given them something to discuss as a staff and maybe to discuss with their pupils. And I really like your slides as well with the staircase. Very nice. But well done, and keep shouting about it, because I think it needs that message long and strong.
Yeah. I
think, the authoritarian culture, particularly of inner city academies, is not great.
Well, it's the authoritarian approach is cheaper and it's cost effective.
Doesn't need any skill.
If you've only got a few children that are struggling, if what I think we're going to have is so many children coming back, going down, you're going to need more people doing one-to-one and more stress on the pastoral team and stuff for kids than ever before, and so it's not cost effective anymore. And we could probably ride the storm and get back to where we were at 6 months ago, but there was still a huge number of children being failed. Whereas, by a little bit of investment now, which probably won't cost us any more money now than what it would do if we don't do it, we can set up a much better system going forward. That's it's very much, it's like I say, the stuff about the Lose the Booth conference, it's that people are constantly being told.
What was that conference again? I didn't know that one.
It was the Lose the Booze one. It was about isolation booze.
Oh yes, right.
There were brilliant speakers there, and there was a lot of people who attended that were more curious than anything else. They were being told by their own schools that there is no other way, that we have to do this, and that the people that are saying that there's this alternative are they don't care about the teachers, and they just let the kids run riot, and they're not bothered about results and all that kind of stuff. And then when you listen to the people who have got it there in front of them with their own statistics and stuff of how it's worked really well, you could see people leaving that conference, and people were tweeting about that conference saying, that's really opened my eyes, and maybe there is something in this, and maybe there is a different approach. So, if that's all that comes out of this, the idea that, well, actually it's not lunacy to think there's another way of doing it, then I'm thrilled about that, and I'll keep banging that drum for as long as.
Good on you. We need more of you, more people like you. Thanks very much. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Geraldine.
Hi, Graham. Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi,
I've got a daughter. I've written a book that's out next year, Jessica Kingsley, about being a parent to a PDA child, which I know is very complex in a structured and high demand environment like school. But one of the things I was going to ask is whether it would be possible for schools to work slightly more collaboratively with parents. So asking parents what their outcomes are for their child, because I think for a lot of parents, when after receiving diagnosis, you have had to shift your perspective. And often we're not perhaps so concerned about those sort of attainment targets, particularly when they do have complex needs. And perhaps schools talking to parents about what they want to achieve, would that be something that they would be willing to do you think?
I'd like to think so. I mean, I think any child that's got any kind of additional plan or anything like that, to not include the parents in that is crazy to me, you know.
Yeah.
Because you're the one that's dealing with it all of the time and have the strategies, and some of those strategies won't work in school, some of them will, you know, but it's really important that we have that dialogue going on, and you know what school are trying to do, and school know what you're doing. But in terms of, you know, we're so obsessed with, you know, I used to be involved in doing all the PEPs, and you know, for the children that are in care and things like that, and children with extreme trauma and, you know, survival instincts and completely dysregulated, and we've got to put a maths and English target on there, to prioritise a maths and English target on their document. Maths and English is not not where the priority is. And yes, you know, we have to bring these things in, but those things come at the end. We have to get all the bases done first. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that the targets that need to be prioritised are the well-being targets for especially a child like yours, or a child that's experienced the different traumas, or maybe it's ADHD or whatever it is that they've got. Let's do the well-being stuff first, and let's, you know, even if we use the target for different sections of the approach to work through, and then, right, well, when we've achieved this, we can move on to this bit, you know, and stuff. But
I think it's really understanding. It's really hard to convey, isn't it? But how difficult school can be for some children. And I think sometimes those markers where it's attendance or punctuality, or even the fact that they're quiet. I mean, I know you've raised it before about that quiet child. You know, that quiet child is a real cause for concern, isn't it?
I think that's massive. I think schools don't listen to parents that are saying that. You know, if for me, if a parent was saying to me, my child's coming home and their behaviour is out of control, yet at school they're managing pretty well, then the first thing I would be thinking that there's a disparity here. Whereas it's kind of not always, but it's too often it's a blame game. Oh, maybe there's not enough structure in at home, or maybe they get their own way all the time, or whatever. There's it's too easy to blame rather than to investigate, and that's where we go wrong a lot of the time. And I think that kind of that two-way street is really important, you know. And I
think what you're doing is so important, because I think often by the time you do get those resources put on your child, it's too late. And I think that's really what you touched on earlier, is it's about really being really vigilant for these children, because often by the time all that stuff's thrown on them, all those resources and support, they are they're done, aren't they, with that system?
It's been there's too many built up failure by that point, and the sort of self-esteem is too low to recover from, and that's why when they used to end up coming to an SEMH setting, which is not the right place for a child that's on the autistic spectrum, but so many of them are, and they would come and they would just be absolute rock bottom and everything was failure. So how can we expect these children to forecast a good outcome if all they've got is negative outcomes to choose from? It just doesn't make sense, you know. And I was talking to Geraldine before about that neurosequential approach. I could try and bring that in, but I'm trying to do something that involves positive touch and maybe music or dance type therapies with a 13-year-old that's had failure after failure after failure and work avoidance after work avoidance. They're not going to do those things with me. If I go in and I do those things with a reception child, then I can get in before the failures, but I've also got a much more willing participant. So the whole system, and you've been the parent in this, I've been the parent in this, going to the, you know, when you go into the meetings to get the EHCP or something like that, you have to talk about your child at their worst, on their worst day. And it's soul destroying to have to do it. But if you don't do that, you don't get taken seriously. Mm. So we have to have a situation where the child fails before we do anything. What we need to be being preemptive and getting in before they fail. But again, that's another separate, bigger issue with the whole system itself. But
well, thanks for that. It was really good to talk, and hopefully now is the time for change. If it's not going to happen now, it's never going to happen.
Well, we keep trying, and I'll be interested to see your drawings.
Thanks.
Thanks, Eliza. Okay, guys, I'll finish it there then. Thank you very much. It's been an absolute blast.